Okay, today we're going to change rear brake calipers and rotors and brake pads on this 2012 Dodge Journey we have here. We have a caliper that's seized. It is no longer releasing the way it should. So what you're going to want to do is start off with a 13 mil socket in order to remove your two fasteners up top. This will separate your caliper from your caliper bracket assembly. So I'm going to leave that brake hose to the end because I want to undo this emergency brake cable first. So I'm going to just pry this off. These pads were brand new and they are no longer. They are now wore off and we need to replace them. Next, what you're going to want to do is take this spring and remove it from your parking brake actuator here. It's spring loaded, and this will give us a better chance of easily removing the park brake cable from the caliper assembly. It might be a little difficult. Okay, so the park brake can be a bit tedious at times. What usually makes it easier is if you take a pair of vice grips, clamp the actual park brake assembly down. It's spring loaded. I'll show you that in a minute. And then what you can do is take a pair of pliers and pull out on the park brake cable just enough that you can undo it from this hook here. So now I'll go ahead and undo the vice grips, and I'll let the actuator just fold back. Spring loaded mechanism, it just goes back and forth. There's your cable. You have two tangs here. You got one on this side, you got one on the opposite side. A small screwdriver, just push in on it and pull down, and there you go. There's your park brake cable. There's your old semi-loaded caliper. Right, still full of brake fluid. Next, we'll go ahead and remove our caliper bracket containing our brake pads and remove the rotor. Okay, 18 millimeter required for the caliper bracket assembly. Go ahead and remove this unit. Set these fasteners aside. And due to a seized caliper, these brake pads are no longer salvageable, which is a shame because they're only 3 months old. So that pad actually has some material, but it's grungy. Not salvageable. And the inboard pad took a fair deal of beating. It actually wore it right down to the wear indicator. Rotor just slides off just like any other. This rotor is actually deemed not reusable, I'd say. Somebody might take a dial indicator or dial gauge and try and mic this, see if this is actually worth saving, and if it is worth taking it onto a brake lathe and shaving it off. Well, guess what? I bought new rotors. Okay, so next we're going to get started. We're going to put a new rotor on this vehicle and our new caliper, get everything all hooked up here, and get this car back on the road again. Next, we'll go ahead and install our rotor. Very straightforward. Just slide it onto the hub assembly. Next, we're going to go ahead and unbox our new caliper. First, we got to dismantle the unit. Our new caliper bracket. We must separate it from the actual caliper itself, and we got to install our new brake pads, seeing how the other ones are no longer anywhere near in good enough condition to use anymore. I'm going to go ahead and put these brand new ceramic style brake pads on the opposite side as well. That way that's a matching set I can't remember exactly what I put on the opposite side for brake pads, so I'm going to go ahead and install those as well. And it has a brand new set of matching brake pads in the back end, because you are technically supposed to replace them as a pair. So in this kit, we're going to have brand new hardware. There's 2 washers for your brake hose, two copper washers, anti-rattle clips. You're also going to find that you're going to have these in your hardware for your brake pads itself. So, you know, you can keep these. I'm going to just keep these in the box for another day, because the ones that are on it, on the passenger side, should be okay, seeing as how it was only 3 months ago that they were replaced. So I'm just going to leave them. These guys have got to go in here. So I'll go ahead and install those, and we'll get this caliper back in this vehicle. Alright, so undoing our caliper assembly here, you might need a 15mm wrench to install here. You might find that this might actually turn on you, so or it may not. You might get off lucky. So you got brand new fasteners with this unit. Just go ahead and undo those, leave them aside, and now we'll go ahead and install our clips into the caliper assembly and install the new brake pads. Same as you would any other vehicle. You're going to want some disc brake quiet material. You're going to want to put that on the backing plate of your brake pads, same as any other vehicle. Most decent set of brake pads that you purchase from your automotive store usually come with them. Okay, so organic grease. Everything's got to be green nowadays. So, but if you carry around a tube of this, if you're doing a brake job or if you have multiple vehicles, always good to have this in your shop, just near the shelf, you know, just in case you need it someday. Alright, so we're going to go ahead and install these clips now and get this vehicle put back together. Okay, so installing our clips, what you're going to want to do is take your old caliper bracket and just use it as a reference as to how your new clips go into place and which ones go where. Like I say, you might have to push on them, you might have to pull, you might have to work with it. You know, if one doesn't fit, you know, try the opposite side kind of deal. And just do that until you get all your new clips back in, and then you can install your brand new brake pads. Okay, so when you're working on the Journey or Caravan, you're going to want to take note that 4 of these pieces aren't exactly the same. You're going to want to take a look at the little tangs on the end of these guys here. There's actually some of them that are for the top and some of them are for the bottom. You're going to want to take note. Some of these tangs have a kind of a weird bend in them, so composed to the others. So if you take note here, you see how this one is shaped, and then see how this one is shaped. You can tell there's a variance between the two. So you're going to want to take a note of that and make sure you have them installed properly, so you're not fighting them, because they're very easily to bend, these units. So you got to want to take care of those as much as possible. Don't abuse them. And that's how you should have it once you're done. Now you can go ahead and install your brand new brake pads in your caliper bracket assembly. And this is what the unit should look like once it is ready to be installed into the vehicle, just like so. Now we can install the assembly back onto our vehicle and fasten the bolts down and torque them as required. Next, go ahead and tighten down our caliper bracket and torque them down, and then we will proceed to installing our caliper itself, hook up our park brake cable, and install our brake hose. Okay, so the installation of your caliper, you want to start off with your park brake. I've noticed you can, if you remove this spring, just take it off briefly, just undo it and let them hang there, and take your vice grips and attach your vice grips there to hold your actuator here in place for a minute. It kind of makes it a little easier for you to install your park brake cable. So we'll go ahead and do that for you now, right in real time. Okay, just to hold them there. And now, let's see if we can install this unit. Okay, now with our cable attached, I'm going to go ahead and install the spring and proceed to the next step, mounting our caliper. Just like so.
Oh yeah, just leave the key in the door for some robber to come and take it out.
Yeah. Okay, with that all done now, we'll go ahead and tighten up our caliper bolts here, 13 mil. Make sure they're nice and snug. Now we're going to want to test the operation of our park brake cable. And we're going to also want to bleed our caliper itself. So what we're going to have to do here is a 10 millimeter socket. You're going to need a buddy, of course, in order to do this. So I'm going to just loosen off this bleeder screw and get it all ready to go. And once that's all bled, then we're all systems go. And make sure that the service brake is fully functional. And you're always going to want to make sure with these split type calipers, these two-piece calipers, you can actually get these calipers installed backwards. So you got to remember, bleeder screw always has to be facing up. If you have it inverted, you're not going to have brake pressure at all. So always make sure, it's a typical problem the garages see, is you got to have your bleeder screw facing up, because if you have these units in upside down or inverted, it may bolt up together fine. You might be able to hook up everything except the park brake cable, of course, but I mean, you're not going to have your service brake functioning the way it should.
Well, no, not to you, because you don't have to work tomorrow.
Alright, so once the brake hose is then connected to the vehicle, you're going to need an assistant to bleed the brakes. So once you get your assistant to pump them, typical situation applies. You just apply your brakes, you get your assistant to hold them, open the bleeder screw just a little bit, let all the air out. You will hear a lot of air seeping out of there. And what the objective is here is you're going to want to get all the air out. So you just keep repeating that cycle until you get all the air out of the brake caliper. And then you're basically done. And then you're going to want to test your caliper, see if you can turn your rotor freely. And if you can't, well, then the brakes are fine if you have your service brake applied. So I'm going to go ahead and turn this rotor. I'm going to get my assistant to apply the brakes. Go ahead. Okay, brake rotor stops. Release. I can turn the rotor freely. Park brake applied. Okay. Alright, and release. Just like so. So you want to test that operation. Once that's done and completed, you're going to want to take the vehicle out on the highway and test the service brakes and the park brake. Make sure it does what it's supposed to do. And if all is good, then you're good to go. Remember to torque your wheel nuts after 100 kilometers or 60 miles of driving. Take care, guys. We'll see you next weekend.